Now, on India's sense, the focus has been the fallout of the war on India on all aspects. We covered the political war of words, we covered the energy aspect of it, we now talk about the strategic impact of the war. And this is where things get layered and complicated. The Iranian missiles that downed in Sri Lankan waters mean that the war theatre has expanded rapidly, reached India's backyard. Sri Lanka also has deep economic linkages with China, the country that is openly backing Iran, condemning US and Israel, the country that gets massively impacted because of the change in the energy routes. And this will require India to navigate the present situation both deftly and pragmatically. As far as the China angle is concerned, viewers, not only is China supporting Iran, it will also be significantly impacted by the changed oil dynamics. China is the #1 importer of Iran oil. And the longer this war drags, the more its energy needs will be at risk. It's no coincidence that China lowered its annual economic growth target to the lowest level since 1991, even as Beijing continues its rapid development of several other industries. And that means that China will be impacted. Its top oil sources are Iran, followed by Venezuela, both of whom have been massively hit. And economic fallouts are never in isolation, viewers. They often lead to larger geopolitical impact. And that's something that needs to be remembered when one talks about the larger fallout of this for India from a strategic point of view, from its neighborhood point of view. And in fact, those are the big questions that we are posing to our guests joining us this week on India Sense. First and foremost, has the dynamics of the war now completely changed? That's the first key question that we ask, with Pezeshkian saying he's not going to be attacking any of the other neighboring countries. Has that now completely changed the war from here on? Secondly, could this conflict drag on indefinitely simply because there are two completely different positions that exist from the American side and from the Iranian side? Thirdly, how will India's strategic position be tested in the midst of this? We spoke about Sri Lanka, we spoke about China, so many other aspects. Next up, what will be the economic fallout on India? War enters the neighborhood. Will India's balancing act be tested from here on? Those are some of the questions that we're going to put forth to Michael Feller, who's the co-founder and chief strategist of geopolitical strategy, joining us from Australia, from Melbourne. And we have DP Srivastava, former Indian ambassador to Iran, with us as well. In fact, Ambassador Srivastava, let me start with you. We've put out some of those important aspects, all of which are likely to be the key areas of impact for India. In your assessment, some of the questions that we put forth, has the context now completely changed for this conflict, with the Iranian president saying the attacks will not be on any of the country's neighbors going forward? Ambassador Srivastava?
I don't think so, because Iran never said that they are going to attack the neighboring country.
Okay, I believe there's an audio issue, sir. We'll try and connect and fix that in just a bit. Michael Feller, you want to take that question?
Yes. So if you could pose the question again.
I'm saying, has the war dynamics now completely changed, with the Iranian president saying that he will not be attacking neighboring countries?
No, I don't think so, because he gave himself a lot of wriggle room in that comment when he mentioned that countries who aren't involved in attacking Iran, and how one defines attacking Iran or those countries' involvement means everything. So whilst Qatar isn't attacking Iran, it does host US facilities, so you could argue that it is. Same with the United Arab Emirates, same with Kuwait. I saw that message as more directed to countries like Azerbaijan that don't host US assets and haven't been involved directly. I also see that as a message to Pakistan, which hasn't been involved directly, yet Saudi Arabia has requested consultations with Pakistan under their security arrangement, where there is a mutual defence clause. So I saw Pezeshkian's message as primarily directed at those countries rather than the Gulf. I think we will see one way or another attacks on Gulf countries continue. And I also think that it's not really Pezeshkian's prerogative to say this. military matters, one, are the purview of the IRGC and the Supreme Leader. And secondly, if Iran truly is employing this so-called mosaic deterrence doctrine, which pushes down decision-making to the battalion level, to the unit level, then Tehran can't really make those undertakings with any confidence, I would think.
Okay, so that's an important point you're making, that this is primarily directed towards Azerbaijan, Pakistan, and not the other countries who continue to host large American assets and bases. Ambassador Srivastav, I want to ask to you largely the question pertaining to the India impact, whether you talk about the oil impact, whether you talk about the fact that this has now expanded, the war theatre has expanded all the way till India's backyard. How do you read those very important signs?
You know, the closure of the Persian Gulf or Hormuz Strait has removed 20% of the global oil supply in one stroke. There's no alternative source to compensate for loss of supplies on such a scale, and for which an exemption was offered by President Trump. That is only about the Russian oil on the high seas, and that is simply 7 million barrels. And India imports 2.4 million barrels a day from Persian Gulf. Now, there are other claimants also for this 7 million barrels. In fact, most of this may already be committed to China. Even assuming that this was available to us, this would hardly meet our 2 days requirements. So there is no other source which can compensate for this scale. Therefore, the prices will shoot up. And they have already shot up. They have gone up to $94. That is $14 increase in 6 days. And if you take it over a month's period, it's about $18 to $19 increase. $1 increase in the price of oil translates into an annual increase in India's annual import bill of 14,000 crores, or roughly $1.8 billion. So this is in case that oil price hike is sustained. So this is going to be a major burden. Now, the second part is the LNG.
Right.
And India imports 55% of LNG from this region, of which Qatar provides 40%. Qatar has stopped producing and exporting LNG in last 2 days after attack on the Ras Laffan refinery.
Yes.
So LNG prices, the spot prices for Asian markets have tripled in 2 days, from $10 to $35.
So those are very important points you're making, sir. And at no point of time that we have not been able to really fully grasp what lies ahead. One is that an increase in oil impacts our overall finances. And if you add to it the rupee volatility, which is only likely, then the import bill could actually be higher on both accounts, both of which are points to which the government has said that they have robust reserves and they are in a comfortable position. But Michael Feller, I want to bring you in on just this aspect as well. One is the energy markets, the supply routes, all of which that have been impacted. Second is the fact that suddenly the war theatre has expanded so much. This is not just a war that's taking place in the Middle East. You have now the entire Indo-Pacific also standing completely exposed. And you are in Melbourne, and many believe that, and in fact, it was in Australia itself that Mark Carney and Anthony Albanese spoke about how this war could have more NATO allies as well. So your sense of the enlarging nature of the war theatre.
Yes, that's right. And sadly, Australia hasn't been as forward-thinking as India, and our supplies, our stocks are nowhere near as large as yours, even though we are an oil producer in our own right. So it's scary for everybody in the region. It's also scary, obviously, because we saw that Iranian ship torpedoed off the coast of Sri Lanka, and there were 3 Australian sailors on the US submarine. They were being trained. They weren't directly involved in the torpedoing, yet you can see that there's multiple links there. One thing I will say about the ships in that region is that India's humanitarian decision to take the Iranian ship into Kochi that does pose a risk that, of course, the US may decide to take away those waivers in response. They see any Iranian ship as a combatant and wouldn't like to see that ship being protected by any third party. So that's just a wild card to watch. I'm not necessarily suggesting that will happen. I think
that is
the
well
United
within the
States,
realm of possibility, and that's a very fair
all within
assessment
the
of what you're
realm.
saying. That's correct. And in fact, let's take a quick word from Ambassador Srivastav on just that. Ambassador Srivastav, you want to come in on what Michael Feller just said? Okay, I believe that audio line needs to be fixed again.
Yes, there's going to be a risk of expansion, but there's a larger point. Let me just touch on it. The expansion of warring from nuclear issue.
Unfortunately, sir, that audio line needs to be fixed and we'll try and connect some other time. But very quickly, Michael Feller, 30 seconds, we have to close this. Second, I want to ask about is the final word, which is about the larger issue with regards to India's balancing act. We've been very clear about the fact that we have ties with both Israel and Iran, and we will maintain that. You see that happening?
Yes, India is committed to multi-alignment. I don't see that changing. I think that the actions of the United States last year with regards to tariffs have borne out India's decision to stand alone as the sensible decision. I think India can't afford to be too dependent on one economy, on one market. So in India's position, multi-alignment makes sense. But of course, it does lead to dangers because you can be seen as being partisan, even though you're not. So this is the nature of wars. Also, it's the nature of the Western mentality, which is very much black and white, either or. It's not used to such multi-polarity or multi-alignment strategies. But perhaps the West will get used to that as well, because that's definitely the world that we're heading into.
Or perhaps there'll be more divine intervention, just like what we saw in Oval Office about a couple of hours back. I'm going to leave it there. Michael Feller, thanks much for speaking to me on India Sense View.